In an epoch of profound darkness, when monarchs fell silent and generals reigned with tyrannical fear,
The Lord will raise up a deliverer where no one expects it.
she was not a warrior, nor a prophetess, merely a woman.
Water. Give me water.
When God intends to act, even the most humble of hand becomes a potent instrument. Courage resides not on the battlefield, but in the heart that obeys. The land was shrouded in darkness. Israel, humbled and prostrate, groaned beneath the relentless yoke of oppression. For 20 years, God's chosen people suffered under the cruel dominion of Jabin, king of Canaan, and his formidable general, Sisera. Their iron chariots tore through the pathways and fields like instruments of devastation. Villages were plundered, men abducted into servitude, women and children left to lament their fate. It was an epoch when song had ceased and fear permeated every breath. For 3 millennia, we have resided in Israel. The fertile, promised land groans beneath the oppressive yoke of the Canaanite lords. Jabin, king of Hazor, and his general, Sisera, enforce a relentless dominion marked by brutality and exploitation. Once vibrant cities are now deserted. Roads, previously arteries of commerce and fellowship, are treacherous. Hope, a flickering flame, struggles to avoid extinction. 20 long years of suffering have etched resignation and fear into the very fabric of our people. The memory of the divine promise of a land flowing with milk and honey feels like a distant, almost unreachable dream. In this bleak landscape, where brute force and cruelty reign supreme, emerges the figure of Jael, an ordinary woman, a tentmaker, wife of Heber the Kenite. Her life unfolds far from battlefields, royal palaces, and political machinations. Her world is that of the tent, the home, the quotidian, a seemingly inconsequential world where the sole concern appears to be daily survival. Yet, beneath the veneer of normalcy resides a discerning soul, a heart that beats in empathetic rhythm with the tribulations of her people. Seeking a respite from the dominant power, Heber forged an alliance with Jabin. A pragmatic choice, perhaps, in a context where survival reigned supreme. But Jael, in quiet contemplation, observed the fallout of this decision. She witnessed the suffering of her people, the downtrodden gaze of the men, the fear in the eyes of the children, and in the stillness of her tent, a seed of indignation began to sprout, a flame of courage fueled by injustice and oppression. News of an Israelite uprising, spearheaded by the prophetess Deborah and the warrior Barak, reaches their ears like a bolt of hope. Faith, dormant beneath the oppressive weight of fear, begins to stir. The promise of liberation, whispered in secret, reignites the flickering flame of hope in the hearts of the downtrodden. Unassumingly, Jael scans the horizon, listening intently for the premonitory signs, preparing for the impending events. The battle looms, violent and relentless. Sisera, the feared Canaanite commander, trusts in the strength of his iron chariots, in the superiority of his army. But fate at times follows devious paths, unforeseen trails. A torrential downpour transforms the bed of the Kishon River into a mire, ensnaring the war chariots, converting Canaanite advantage into vulnerability. Defeat is inexorable. Sisera, abandoned by his men, flees on foot, seeking refuge, and destiny leads him to Jael's tent. It is at this nexus, this seemingly accidental encounter between executioner and victim, that Jael's story attains an epic dimension, transforming an ordinary woman into an instrument of liberation. What transpires thereafter defies expectations, challenges conventional roles, and invites us to contemplate the potency inherent in silence, discretion, and the courage to act when the world anticipates passivity. The journey that now unfolds will lead us through the labyrinthine intricacies of this narrative, exploring its profound implications and unearthing the lessons it offers for the challenges of our time. Contrary to the grandeur of armies and the pomp of kings, Sisera's encounter with Jael unveils the paradoxical strength of hospitality and cunning. He, the feared commander, seeks refuge in the tent of an anonymous woman, trusting in the ancestral tradition of protecting guests. She, in turn, welcomes him with words of peace and gestures of care, offering him water and a place to rest. But beneath the seemingly benevolent facade, a plan unfolds, woven with the silent determination of an unlikely heroine. The tent, a symbol of refuge and intimacy, becomes the stage for an act of courage that would reverberate through the centuries. In this interim, it is crucial to contemplate the moral complexities of Jael's action. In a context of war and oppression, where violence serves as the dominant discourse, the line between right and wrong becomes blurred. Treachery in ordinary times would be considered a despicable act. However, under the lens of liberating an oppressed people, the violation of a peace oath takes on a different dimension. Jael's choice, however drastic, reflects the urgency of the situation and the absence of peaceful alternatives. She acts as an instrument of divine justice, executing a sentence that human laws proved incapable of articulating. It is thus pertinent to re-evaluate the figure of Sisera from a novel perspective, not merely as a cruel oppressor, but also as a vulnerable individual, misled by his own hubris and the blinding nature of power. In seeking refuge within Jael's tent, he places his trust in a system of values that ironically precipitates his downfall. Hospitality, a sacred principle in ancient cultures, becomes his snare. The tranquility of the tent, the restorative sleep, the deceptive illusion of safety are the very elements that lead him to his ultimate fate. Furthermore, the role of everyday objects in Jael's story warrants particular attention. The tent peg, a mundane implement, is transmuted into a lethal weapon in the heroine's hands. The hammer, a tool of labor, becomes the instrument of justice. This transmutation of the commonplace into the extraordinary underscores God's capacity to effect his purposes through the most unassuming resources. Jael's strength does not lie in martial prowess or sophisticated weaponry, but rather in her unwavering faith and her courage to act decisively at the opportune moment. Now, contemplate how this dynamic manifests in contemporary situations. How frequently do we encounter injustices that seem insurmountable, oppressors who appear invincible? And how often do we feel powerless in the face of the enormity of the problems? Jael's story reminds us that even the smallest acts, the most discreet decisions, can have a profound impact on the course of events. The courage to say no to oppression, the resolve to defend the oppressed, the faith that justice will prevail are the weapons at our disposal to transform the world. Jael's tent, therefore, is not merely a physical place, but also a symbol of our capacity to act as agents of change, even amidst the darkness. Delving deeper into the tapestry of this narrative, it becomes imperative to analyze the socio-cultural context that shaped Jael, and by extension, her actions. Israelite society at the time, while patriarchal, afforded women a crucial role in maintaining the familial and communal fabric. Far from being mere decorative figures, they were responsible for the upbringing of children, the management of the household, and, in many instances, artisanal and agricultural production. This active participation within the domestic sphere, however, did not necessarily translate into formal political or social power. In this intricate backdrop, the figure of the prophetess Deborah emerges as a beacon of hope and leadership. Her presence in the Israelite political military landscape challenges the conventions of the era, demonstrating that wisdom and courage are not exclusive attributes of the male gender. Deborah, in summoning Barak to lead the army against Sisera, not only fulfills a divine calling, but also establishes a precedent for female participation in the struggle for liberation. It is within this context of spiritual and social ferment that Jael's actions assume even greater significance. Although Jael holds no formal leadership position, her actions reveal a profound grasp of power dynamics and a keen awareness of her people's needs. In contrast to Heber, who pursues a pragmatic alliance with the oppressor, Jael prioritizes justice and liberation, even if it entails defying social norms and risking her own life. Her choice, therefore, reflects a sense of collective responsibility and a deep identification with the Israelite cause. Consequently, it is paramount to dispel the image of Jael as a mere executor of a predetermined plan. Her action, while audacious, is not impulsive or unreflective. It is the product of a meticulous assessment of the circumstances, a profound sense of discernment, and an unshakable conviction in the righteousness of her cause. Jael acts as an autonomous moral agent, making a difficult and perilous decision at a pivotal juncture in her people's history. Furthermore, Jael's story invites us to contemplate the nature of courage. We often associate courage with grand public acts, heroic deeds performed on battlefields or political stages. However, Jael's courage lies in her capacity to act in quietude, in discretion, in the intimacy of her tent. Her bravery is not manifested in fiery speeches or displays of physical strength, but rather in her unassuming resolve and her ability to transform an ordinary object into an instrument of liberation. Consequently now, consider how this applies when you encounter situations of injustice within your own context. How often are we called upon to act in silence, to make difficult choices in moments of crisis, to defend the oppressed, even when it entails risking our own safety? Jael's story teaches us that true courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to act despite fear, to prioritize justice and compassion above convenience and self-preservation. The tent, therefore, remains as a symbol of our capacity to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, to be instruments of change in a world that cries out for justice and liberation. The narrative arc of Jael, therefore, compels a deeper examination of the very nature of leadership and authority. Conventionally, leadership is associated with prominent figures, individuals occupying positions of prominence and wielding formal power. However, Jael's story reveals that true leadership can emerge from the most unanticipated quarters, from the most subtle actions, from the quiet courage of individuals who, outside the glare of the spotlight, nonetheless effect profound transformations in their surroundings. Unlike the overt leadership of Deborah and the military authority of Barak, Jael's leadership is epitomized in her ability to discern the opportune moment for action and her willingness to assume full accountability for her choices. In contrast to hierarchical leadership, Jael's story presents a model of servant leadership where the individual places themselves at the service of a greater cause, prioritizing the collective well-being above their own interests. Jael's act of sheltering Sisera in her tent and subsequently executing the act that would liberate her people exemplifies a profound awareness of her social responsibility and an unwavering commitment to justice. Servant leadership, in this vein, is distinguished by its humility, empathy, and capacity to inspire others through exemplary action. Furthermore, it is crucial to differentiate between authority and power. Sisera possessed military power and the authority conferred by his position as commander of the Canaanite army. However, this authority proved to be fragile and ephemeral in the face of Jael's resolve. True authority, on the contrary, emanates from moral integrity, the coherence between professed values and actions taken, and the capacity to inspire trust and respect. Jael, lacking formal power, achieved moral authority through her courage and justice. From another perspective, Jael's story offers a rich reflection on the dichotomy between the public and the private. The tent, a space of intimate domesticity, becomes the stage for an event of profound public significance. Jael's seemingly solitary and individual act reverberates through history, altering the fate of a nation. This inversion of traditional logic, where the private encroaches upon the public and the individual transcends to the collective, prompts us to reconsider the boundaries between these spheres and to acknowledge the transformative potential of everyday actions. Now consider how this dynamic manifests in your own relationships and work environment. How often do you encounter situations where formal leadership proves ineffective or even oppressive? And how frequently do you witness acts of courage and servant leadership arising from the most unexpected quarters? Jael's story inspires us to cultivate our own leadership capacity, to act with integrity and justice in all spheres of our lives, and to recognize the transformative power of our daily choices. Ultimately, true leadership resides not in the position we hold, but in the actions we undertake. Jael's actions reverberate through time, yet not without sparking debate concerning women's roles in historical and religious accounts. Frequently relegated to secondary positions, women are all too often silenced or stereotyped in traditional narratives. Jael's story, however, emerges as a potent counterpoint, defying female invisibility and granting agency to a figure who, superficially, might be deemed insignificant. Nevertheless, her act transcends the domestic sphere, inscribing itself into the annals of history as an act of national liberation. A crucial layer in this analysis rests upon the theological interpretation of Jael's intervention. Some scholars view it as an exemplary instance of obedience to a higher divine command, justifying her act as a necessary sacrifice for the salvation of her people. Conversely, others challenge the morality of her actions, arguing that treachery and violence cannot be justified, even in the name of a righteous cause. The moral ambiguity inherent in Jael's story, therefore, compels a profound reflection on the boundaries of ethics and justice during times of war and oppression. Furthermore, it is paramount to acknowledge the pivotal role of collective memory in the perpetuation of Jael's history. Deborah's song, a hymn of praise to the heroine, played a critical role in transmitting her story across generations. Poetry, music, and oral narratives thus become potent vehicles for the preservation of memory and the celebration of heroic deeds. Jael's story, sung and recounted, becomes a potent symbol of resistance and hope for the Israelite people, inspiring them to strive for their freedom. Conversely, a comparative analysis with other female figures in the Bible, such as Esther or Judith, enriches our understanding of women's role in the history of salvation. Each of these heroines, in their unique ways, challenges societal norms and acts with courage and resolve to safeguard their people. Their interwoven narratives unveil the multifaceted and diverse female experience within the biblical context, demonstrating that strength and wisdom are not exclusively masculine attributes. Now, consider how this dynamic manifests in contemporary representations of history. How often are women portrayed as passive figures or merely appendages to the male narrative? And how frequently are their stories silenced or distorted by traditional historical canons? The story of Jael, therefore, serves as a poignant reminder of the crucial need to reclaim the voices of women from the past and acknowledge their fundamental role in shaping history. The tent, in this context, symbolizes the space where history is rewritten, where women take center stage, and where justice triumphs over oppression. Jael's story, beyond its religious and moral implications, casts a unique light on the interplay between vulnerability and strength. Often, fragility is perceived as a deficiency, an impediment to effective action. However, the narrative of the Canaanite heroine reveals that apparent weakness can, paradoxically, be a wellspring of power. Her social standing, lack of military training, and gender All factors that would place her at a disadvantage in a direct confrontation are transmuted into strategic assets. Her discretion, her ability to move undetected, her intimate knowledge of the terrain and familiarity with local customs, all these elements contribute to the successful culmination of her mission. Analogously, Sisera's vulnerability, exhausted and fleeing, compels him to seek refuge in Jael's tent. His trust in hospitality, a sacred value within the cultural milieu of the era, blinds him to the lurking peril. His weakened physical state, his need for repose, his belief in the supremacy of his military might, all these factors render him susceptible to Jael's actions. The stark contrast between Sisera's ostentatious military strength and Jael's quiet vulnerability is a pivotal narrative element, demonstrating that power does not always reside where one anticipates. Another pertinent facet of this discussion lies in analyzing emotional intelligence as a pivotal factor in Jael's success. Her ability to discern Sisera's emotions, to anticipate her actions, and to cultivate an atmosphere of trust reveals remarkable mental agility and astute perceptiveness. In contrast to brute force, which relies on violence and coercion, emotional intelligence allows for subtle manipulation of others' behavior through empathy and persuasion. From a broader perspective, Jael's story resonates in numerous everyday situations. How often do we encounter challenges that seem insurmountable, adversaries that intimidate us with their strength and power? And how often, instead of succumbing to paralyzing fear, can we find in our own vulnerability a wellspring of resilience and ingenuity? Consider, for instance, the narratives of small businesses defying large corporations, individuals overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles, communities uniting to confront adversity, the capacity to transform weakness into strength, to utilize available resources with intelligent and creative application is one of the most defining characteristics of the human spirit. Given this, contemplate how you can apply these principles to your personal and professional life. In what situations do you feel most vulnerable? What are your greatest strengths? By acknowledging your own weaknesses and potentialities, you will be better equipped to meet the challenges ahead, utilizing your emotional intelligence and adaptability to achieve your goals. Remember, vulnerability is not an impediment, but rather an opportunity for growth and transformation. Gazing upon the tapestry we have woven thus far, we discern that the threads, initially scattered, converge into an intricate and compelling pattern. This is not a mere mosaic of events, but rather a living, pulsating organism whose parts intertwine in a ceaseless dance of cause and effect. The path we have traversed traces an arc that closes not on a terminus, but on a threshold, a portal to fresh insights. The driving force that propelled Jael, the quiet courage that guided her, resonates within us like a distant echo, awakening an ancestral resonance. The unfolding narrative is not a simple tale of individual heroism, but rather a mirror reflecting our own contradictions, moral dilemmas, and difficult choices. Jael's story, in its inherent ambiguity, compels us to confront the gray areas of existence, those moments where the line between right and wrong blurs into imprecision. And in this confrontation lies the opportunity for genuine growth, for an expansion of our moral consciousness. Like the confluence of a river's waters meeting the ocean, the diverse perspectives we've explored converge into a singular current, a torrent of insights that beckon us to delve deeper into the very essence of the human condition. The interwoven threads of leadership, vulnerability, justice, and power which have emerged throughout our journey entwine into a complex knot, demanding that we patiently and judiciously unravel its intricacies. Contemplating this journey thus far, we are invited to appreciate the vastness of our potential, to acknowledge the strength inherent within each of us, even in moments of greatest vulnerability. The flame of courage, which burned brightly in Jael's heart, can also ignite our spirits, propelling us to act with audacity and resolve in the face of adversity. The legacy we inherit, the tapestry of struggles and triumphs that have shaped our civilization, provides us with a roadmap, a compass to navigate the challenges of the present and construct a more just and equitable future. Like a beacon guiding sailors through the inky blackness, Jael's story illuminates our path, revealing the intricate beauty and complexity of the human condition. Her act, a ray of light in a shadowed landscape, inspires us to seek truth, uphold justice, and strive for a world where human dignity reigns supreme. The silence that followed her heroic deed is not a silence of acquiescence, but rather a pregnant silence, one that invites us to listen to our inner voice, the voice of conscience that guides us towards the good. We stand therefore on the precipice of a new understanding, a new awakening. What we have learned thus far prepares us for the ultimate reflection, for the synthesis that will imbue meaning to our entire journey. The next step will lead us to unravel the legacy of Jael, to discover the lessons her story holds for our time, for our future. Let us then prepare for the final act of this narrative, for the moment the curtain falls and the final message resonates within our hearts. Jael's tent, once a discreet refuge amidst the vast expanse of the Israelite landscape, transcends the materiality of canvas and stakes to become an enduring symbol. It resonates through the centuries, not as a monumental edifice erected in a public square, but as a whispered reminder to the heart, a beacon igniting the flame of courage in the most unforeseen recesses of the soul. The narrative we uncover does not conclude within the sands of time, but endures as an invitation to introspection, a mirror reflecting our latent capacity to transform adversity into opportunity, silence into action. The stillness of the tent, stage for a singular act of audacity, teaches us that true revolution often does not manifest in the clamor of the masses, but in the quiet firmness of a personal decision. Jael, weaver of destinies, reveals that strength does not lie in the possession of weapons or the display of power, but in the unwavering conviction of a purpose, in the faith that moves mountains, and in the courage that defies conventions. Her story is an anthem to resilience, to the human capacity to flourish even in barren ground, to find light even in the deepest darkness. The moral ambiguity that pervades her actions, the fine line separating the just from the questionable, does not diminish her deed, but rather magnifies it. Jael confronts us with the complexity of existence, with the necessity of making difficult choices in an imperfect world, where values collide and consequences intertwine. Her story offers us no easy answers, but rather an invitation to critical reflection, to the relentless pursuit of an ethical path amidst the chaos. Jael's true legacy lies in her ability to provoke us, to challenge us to question our own convictions, to inspire us to act with integrity, even when the world urges us towards conformity. Jael's example, etched into the annals of history, reminds us that each of us, in our unique individuality, possesses the capacity to be an agent of transformation. We do not require grand stages or thunderous applause to effect change. The tent, the home, the workplace, the community, each of these spaces can become the stage for an act of courage, a decision that resonates through time. True practice begins now, in the daily minutiae of our choices, in the firmness of our intentions, in the faith that guides us towards a more just and compassionate future. May Jael's story serve as a beacon illuminating our path, a constant reminder that hope flourishes in quietude and courage resides within the heart of each of us.